أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. In the name of Allah, the compassionate, the most merciful, all praise is due to Allah, and may His peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Wherever you are, whatever time it may be, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. May the peace and the blessings of Allah be upon all of you. And welcome back again to Let's Talk About It on Thursdays. I am your host, Yassir Fazaga, and it is Thursday, and it gives me great pleasure. We have got a great guest joining us this evening, inshallah. So, if you've joined us last time, we were talking about um, Christmas perspectives as seen by reverts. What is that experience like? And we said that we're not talking about the theology, we're not talking about the jurisprudence, we're just talking about what does it mean, does it feel like for reverts around Christmas time. I know many people, they are told, or for whatever reason they're no longer celebrating Christmas with their family members. And this is the time where there's a great deal of family reunion tradition that has taken place. And we just want to make sure that we understand better what is going on with our brothers and sisters, so that when we talk to them, we are able to address their issues adequately, and we want to speak to the reality that they're living in. So last time we had a beautiful guest, Megan. It's good to have you with us, and thank you for joining. I was just about to tell the story of how this came to be. So we had Brother Malik Shah last week, and he spoke beautifully, but then he said, this is a male perspective, and it was an African American male perspective. And he suggested that it would be much tougher for a Caucasian revert, like the Christmas time. And some of it was that, the idea of when African Americans revert to Islam, it's not seen as a cultural treason. There is no cultural apostasy that is taking place, unlike when it is a Caucasian that reverts back to Islam, and it may be seen as a cultural treason. And also part of the argument is that there is actually Islam has been modeled in the African American community. People would speak about Malcolm X, they would speak about Muhammad Ali. There is a reference point. And that is not the case for Caucasian reverts. And that is why, he was arguing that it would be much tougher for a Caucasian revert. Before we get into it, it's good to have you, Megan, and it's good to see you again.
You too. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, and thank you for being here with us, Bilal. So, just to make sure that I adequately introduce Bilal to us, I know we go back a long time, myself and Megan here. Very accomplished, masha'Allah, since 2007. Megan has been teaching the community. She is a relationship coach. She is the founder of Wives of Jannah. She is a multi-level certified strategic interventionist through the Robbins-Maddanes Center of Strategic Intervention. Her training, as well as other ongoing educational opportunities, have given her the guidance, tools, and inspiration to develop a unique program and content for our Muslim community. As I said, she's been coaching the Muslim and teaching the Muslim community since 2007. She is the founder of Wives of Jannah, where she offers programs and coaching for wives and couples. And she's also the founder of One Meaningful Life Builders, offering an Islamic personal development community for Muslims, combining coaching, training, and support. Megan is a wife. She is homeschooling mother with 4 children, mashallah, residing in Southern California, where it is very warm, I am guessing.
No, not today. It's actually raining again. So we're freezing over here. And if you remember being here in California, you know that when it drops below 60, we're all freezing, right? So
That
it's
is, yes,
cold.
that was freezing temperature for us. Below 60 was the freezing temperature before us. So Megan, as we start, can you just, if you don't mind, please take us into what was that tradition? What was that tradition like? What is Christmas time like for people who celebrated Christmas and they can no longer celebrate that?
That's a really big question. Bismillah. First of all, assalamu alaikum, everyone. It's really great to be here. I also, before I dive into my story, I really appreciate, I think you said it was Brother Omar's perspective of how different it is for different converts when they choose Islam. For those who come from a Christian background, you know, yeah, there are really, I've learned through the years, there really are different experiences and reactions from family. And a lot of African-American converts have shared that with me, that my experience is going to be very different for those who are familiar with Islam, or maybe not everyone. I mean, there are plenty of African-Americans who have come from really strong Christian families that have told me their families were as upset, but there is some familiarity with Islam, which I think for many people had made the conversation a little easier. I can only speak mostly about my experience, but I can at least also say through the years, a lot of what I've experienced, I have found many other converts have experienced. And I think from the beginning is just understanding that the Christmas holiday season is as big as it gets. And I think anyone who lives anywhere in Canada, United States, UK, you know, the Western world knows that everything is about Christmas once Thanksgiving hits, right? The whole world transforms, and lights and the music and the decor. And so it really is something that growing up, I mean, you're so absorbed in, right? You go to school all month long, you're planning for the Christmas concert, and you look forward to that all month long. You're buying gifts, you're making decorations, you're making ornaments, right? For me, growing up as a child, I mean, my family was really big on holidays, and my mother made a lot of effort for pretty much every single holiday, and Americans have a lot of holidays. So we did all of them. We have a holiday like almost every month of the year. I can't remember which month there's nothing, but there's holidays like at least every few months, right? There's something major. And my mother was, you know, really into making that experience for us as kids as fun or as engaging as it could be. I would say, first of all, I was a true 100% believer in Santa for a very long time. I thought he was real. I always joke around, I was a complete believer in Santa Claus. I can't remember at what age I realized he wasn't real, but I was pretty heartbroken. And I think I spent a few more years hoping that I was wrong because I realized he wasn't real. But for me growing up, it really was a huge focal point of happiness and joy and family and coming together. And just the opportunity, I think for many people to focus on, maybe as a child, of course, right? As a small child, you're already kind of in your own world. But I think even for adults, it's an opportunity to look for hope in life. It was an opportunity to look for the light at the end of the tunnel. It's an opportunity to remember, I think for many people, you know, what the most important things in life are. That's your family, it's your connections, it's serving other people. This idea of like the Christmas spirit and being a giving and people becoming more generous. I think people begin to reconnect with, you know, elements that maybe in a very fast moving capitalistic world, people are really disconnected from, right? So I think for a lot of people, it really brings about positivity, minus the stress of financial expenses and things like that I know a lot of people do go through. But yeah, growing up, it was, you know, my favorite time of year. If you could find a girl who loved Christmas any more than me, it would be like, okay, let me meet her. I was really, really into it. When I was a teenager, when I finally had my own money and I'd had like my first real part-time job and I could earn money, that year I went out and bought Christmas presents for everyone in my family. And I was so excited because it's the first time I could buy gifts. It wasn't like my parents handed me money and then I went and got them a present, right? I had earned my own money. I had worked at my own job and I went out and got things for everyone. So it was really something that was truly meaningful to me, full of happiness, full of joy, and definitely family connection. So that was, you know, for me growing up, this was what it was, not just from my mother, from my father. It was a very, very strong and important tradition. So moving into a place in my life where I was going to leave that behind was a big deal. And I would say that for many converts, through the years having had conversations, you find that for many people, they don't later wrestle with whether or not what they've learned about Islam is true. They're like, okay, you know, the Tawheed in Islam makes sense, right? The revelation makes sense. Islam is the truth. I get it. But that pull to participate in whether you want to call it religious celebration, cultural celebration, family tradition, right? The things that have shaped you your whole life, that pull to participate, to go back to what's familiar, is very, very difficult for some people to overcome, you know, because it's, and I feel like trying to talk to people who have not, there are Muslims that have had, even though they're from a Muslim family, right, that they have had a hard time with their parents or their family because maybe they started to follow Islam and their parents weren't anymore, right? So you do have that within Muslims too, who say like, I'm like a convert too, because my family didn't practice. But for the most part, one of the things I've tried to help people understand is think of the most favorite thing you get to eat with your family or experience with your family or do with your family, and now take all of it and leave it all behind. And not everything, because I said eat, but you know, like just the idea of it's not, I think sometimes we get lost in the ideology of it, like you said, and we forget that people are really leaving behind everything they grew up with and their family bonded through and connected through, or at least leaving behind some parts of that. And it's a big deal. So I don't remember what your original question was. What was it like? But this is where my brain went. Yeah.
Yeah, you are actually answering my question. And I love how you're describing and personalizing this. So Megan, if you're okay, take us to the first Christmas where Megan is a Muslim now. Speaking about all the things that are to be left behind right now.
Well, so for me, things happen in stages. So the first Christmas where Megan was thinking about being Muslim, it's actually the year, this was 1997. And Ramadan and Christmas and Hanukkah, all these things were all in the same December season. And so I actually was trying out fasting for the first time on my winter break from my freshman year of college at home, and not telling my parents that I was obviously trying anything. So that was my first Christmas where I was curious about Islam. The second year after that, I'm pretty sure I didn't change much because my parents didn't know really that I was Muslim yet. The biggest one, I think the biggest difference would probably be my third year in, or maybe it was my fourth year. I was a college student all throughout, right? So I think there was one winter break I wasn't able to come home. But the last one I did, I went home. My family knew I was Muslim. And this one's hard. And I think I remember telling you a story about this before. And this is part of where I tell people, I'm not sure if I did this right. So here's what I did, and I probably wouldn't do it again. I went home for Christmas, and I had to go home that particular winter break, and come Christmas morning, to be honest, I wasn't really sure how to interface with my family back then. I wasn't sure if I came down the hall and I sat with them while they opened gifts, if it was okay or not. You know, religiously, I would say the information available for converts today is getting better in terms of advising what to do, and also a little bit wiser and more compassionate on how to engage with family that truly has no idea what you're doing. They don't really know anything about what you're following. And if they do have any ideas, they're probably really bad, really wrong, and really stereotypical, right? They're not gonna be very knowledgeable. So that first Christmas was very hard because sadly, the hardest memory was that I made my parents cry because I didn't come down the hall. My dad came into my room and said, can't you just come down the hall and just sit with your mother? Can't you just be with us while we open gifts? Okay, like we won't give you anything. When you think about that, like your parents begging you to participate in something, it was hard. At that time, I thought I was doing the right thing. And I stayed in my room and I'm like, nope, I won't come out till you guys are completely done with everything Christmas related. May Allah accept for me my sincerity, whether or not I treated my parents right. At the time, this was what I was advised to do. You cannot go even near them, around them, near the tree, in the living room, nothing. You have to stay completely outside. And even I think what you said in the beginning, whether people, however, especially speaking to Muslims for a minute, however you want to tackle this, right? Fiqh-wise, fatwa-wise, your opinion, what you think. I think what gets lost sometimes in the conversation is that you're talking to a real person. And that real person has parents that love them. And so I think sometimes when we advise people, we're thinking all logical, but sometimes I think we forget how to compassionately look at a person's situation and think, how can I help this person obey Allah in the best way possible that honors their parents in every possible way, that that shows their parents mercy in every possible way. So sadly, my first experiences really at home with that still tend to be very difficult memories for me. So.
And I thank you for that. And that is part of, you know, what you just said towards the end. And you know, the idea is sometimes, you know, we limit our interaction with converts to the jurisprudence part and theology part of it only,
Yeah.
where we want to speak about what is halal and what is haram. But then, you know, there are a lot of ramifications in the process, and I'm not suggesting that we change what is halal and what is haram.
Right.
We're trying to understand that reality which you are, you know, beautifully helping us navigate through the stories that you are telling us. You ended up writing a short ebook that I actually I was quoting you last week when I was talking to Brother Malik. Take us back as to what was the reason behind writing that short ebook. And that short ebook, by the way, is available. It is on Amazon, and it's called "When Holiday Nostalgia Creates Sadness: A Guide to Navigating the Holiday Season for New Muslims."
Sure. You can share the link because it's just my own Amazon upload link. So there's an organization that had asked me to originally put some thoughts together. I think I must have written some Facebook posts at the time for converts in the holiday season. So I took the invitation to heart. And one of the reasons why is because I've often looked, you know, hindsight is 20/20, right? When you know better, you do better. And I look back at my journey and I think I really wish I had, you know, some different advice or someone that could understand what I was really going through at the time. And so I tried to put that into an ebook for other people. And again, because converts are not a monolith, because each individual convert is on their own journey and at their own, you know, they're in their own different part of the journey becoming Muslim. Every single person's holiday experience is going to be different. And their opinion about what's okay and what's not okay, those things vary. They vary quite widely. But I really at the time wanted to speak to the people that I've interacted with and to my old self, which is someone who felt like for years, every Christmas, I'd be out shopping, I'd be going to Target or the grocery store, just something, even at the gas station. And all of a sudden, some Christmas song would come on and I would just find myself crying. I have a very specific memory years back. My husband and I were at like a Subway. Like, I think with the kids, I think we were on the end of some long errands run. You know, when the kids are starving, you're like, fine, we'll go to Subway and grab something small. Like this random Subway, and I hear this one song, and that was it. And it was like, I find myself crying. And the reason I'm finding myself crying and the reason I'm having these emotions is because my attachment to these traditions with my family were so strong. And because my choosing Islam and the way my family and I interacted meant that there was going to be, you know, an ending to that I wasn't going to be going over to visit my family, helping buy the tree and put up the tree and put up the lights and get out the ornaments. I wasn't doing that part anymore. And so it was very hard for me to let go of all those ways of connecting with my parents and with my family. So nostalgia for me specifically, I'm a very nostalgic person anyway. I'm your sentimental person. So for me, that's why I said when I described myself originally as someone whose heart was so attached to the season and everything about it. Like when I was little, my best friend and I, her family would organize Christmas caroling, and we would go Christmas caroling all around the neighborhood. We did cookies and we'd bake and give to the neighborhood. Like we were just so involved in every possible way there was to celebrate. My family was involved in it. So that nostalgic pool would hit me every single year. And not being able to just immerse myself back into that, for me, I think really has been a very long, drawn out process of grief. And it was like you'd get over it and then the next year would come. And I would think, like, I remember it was like so many years had gone by and I'm like, why am I still, like, I still hear a song and I'm still tearing up. What is this about? And it's this for converts, for many people, they've lost a very important and special way to experience things with their family. And it's not just Christmas Day, it's all of the things that lead up to it, the things that come after it. It's, from Thanksgiving to the New Year's, it's, over a month of shared family traditions and things like that. So it was that ebook came out of that place, that wound, that understanding that the holiday season can be very difficult. When you add to that, in my case, I'm very blessed and fortunate that my parents never cut me off. They never cut me out of the family. I would say if there are two people in the world that taught me what rahmah and mercy really looks like, it is my parents. When I was a new convert, I was all zealous and gung-ho and trying to preach to them and change them. And I'm so knowledgeable and religious now, let me teach you. And my mannerisms were horrible. And yet here were my parents who, despite, I think, the immense hurt of me no longer, I don't even know if the hurt for them was as much about the religious tradition as it was adopting something that seemed very foreign to them. There was no longer a representation of our family values or how they understood the values of the society that I was raised in, right? Whatever it was for them, they're the ones that taught me patience and tolerance and the ability to interact and make space for different viewpoints. But other converts, they don't have that experience. And I'm part of a pretty large convert group online. And this particular one is all females. And there are many of them whose families refuse to talk to them. So you've got the loss of holidays, and sometimes you have complete isolation. And so now you're coming to holiday seasons and you're missing out on the traditions, at least, that you're familiar with. And at the same time, now you're missing your family, and maybe even more so than that, knowing that everyone in your family is getting together. And not only that, like, you're either not included or you're not welcomed. And that's very difficult. And I don't want to make this sound like I or anyone else feels like we're victims. We are, like, Allah has given me the greatest thing that there is in this life. Like, he gave me hidayah, right? He showed me Islam. So no one's like a victim to becoming Muslim. But I think what I'm wanting to express is that there is a very real human feeling dynamic to making major changes. And so so I appreciate this conversation, because I think it's something that having that sensitivity can help us all go, a lot further together.
I'm honestly loving this, because I think in your acknowledgement, questions are coming up. It's like, what, why did you think you needed to be harsh, or, glad that looking back at your mannerism, you wouldn't do what what you did in the past. But where did that come from? Because even in the book, you refer to the common mistakes that converts have made, and I'm guess that you're talking about this time during this during the holiday season. And I love how you started listing the comments. You begin by saying, instead of being respectful to their family, converts may choose one of these unfortunate but common mistakes. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to read them one at a time, and tell me just what has changed, and maybe why that happens. So, for example, ignore their family entirely around the holiday season, pretending it's not happening.
Well, that's something I did. There was a period of time where I would call, like, on the 22nd to say hi. And then I'd call on, like, the 26th to say hi. And I wouldn't even acknowledge that anything had happened. And this is really embarrassing to say, but I in my defense, like I said, I was given some pretty harsh, very difficult advice for many, many years about how to participate with my non-Muslim family. And so, I think a lot of people, at least a lot of people who are, I can't speak for any country but America, so I'll just stick with America, is familiar with even we debate, can we say happy holidays? Are we allowed? What if someone says Merry Christmas to you? Like, what should you say back? Can you say you too? Or is that an acknowledgement of something that's wrong? Like, we have these conversations, and I don't mean to even minimize those conversations, in the sense that one of the things I personally love about Islam is that every element of life, there is guidance for it. Like, I don't minimize the importance of those conversations per se. You know, I think there's a place for those conversations. And I also think there's a reason those conversations were coming about, because we're looking at trying to save a generation of youth that are now growing up in America. They're the minority. It's very difficult to hold on to Islam in the mainstream. Like, I think there's always good intentions behind why we have these conversations. At the same time, I think there had been an overemphasis on some of these points specifically, you know, happening in our society. So instead of asking, what is the best way to reflect prophetic mercy to non-Muslims? What is the best way to show non-Muslim family that you are loving and respectful? Instead of asking the most big questions, I think that we were overemphasizing some of these points. And so this is where this came from. It was, you can't say happy holidays because that's an acknowledgement and a recognition of a holiday, which is, ultimately speaking, at least for Christianity, a reflection of the greatest sin that we have in Islam, which is shirk, like the believing that God has a son and a child. The mountains are, you know, there's a verse in the Quran about like the mountains would crumble, right? Please, Sheikh, yeah? Like at the news of this, like there are very serious ayahs about this. Obviously, the Quran is very strong about advocating against the fact that they said Allah has a son, right? So you take this heaviness on the one side, and that's as serious as it gets, right? This is the most serious thing that there is, this belief. But then how do you balance that now with the interaction with human beings? And I think this is where the tension came. So the advice at the time was, you can't say anything. Because if you say anything, in a way, you're giving people permission to believe that which Allah dislikes. And so now we open up into obviously a very deep conversation, which I know you're over here going, oh Lord, this advice. But I mean, but this is like, I've really through the years come to appreciate where all of these pieces came from. But that advice in the ebook came from being told you can't say anything. And so therefore my family, there wasn't just Megan's no longer, okay, logically we get it. She's Muslim now. So of course she's not going to celebrate Christmas because she doesn't believe in Jesus anymore as the Son of God. But she doesn't even call us. She just disappears. She doesn't even, and my father, before he died, we had a couple of different conversations, but the Christmas before he passed away, so he passed away in March, so this was December. I was talking to him on the phone and I called and I said, hey Dad, I just want to say like happy holidays. Like it was, you could tell because I was still coming out of this and I'm kind of saying it in this way. And he said to me, you know, thank you for that. I mean, really, I don't know why people can't just say happy holidays. We know that you don't celebrate this, but it would be really nice. It's great to hear from you. It's so nice for you just to call and say hi to me and your mother. And let me tell you, my heart broke in like 1,000 pieces when I heard that. And that's how I understood there are real humans behind our decisions, and we have to really measure which memory and which lesson we want our parents or our family members to take. And I feel like that's a huge responsibility.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing that. And I think, you know, the therapist in me jumps in right now and say, usually when it comes to issues of anxiety or things that we're not comfortable with, avoidance is usually the first thing that we do. So you call on the 22nd and then you call back again on the 26th and nothing took place during that time. Another mistake that you also pointed out is that converts sometimes would lecture their parents, siblings, extended family about the history of the holiday in an attempt to prove how justified they are in avoiding it.
Yeah. So this one's difficult, and a lot of people have very strong opinions on this. But let me give some context to it. So on the one hand, one would ask, is there, you know, aren't we supposed to tell our families and our friends the truth about this life? Aren't we supposed to do da'wah? Aren't we supposed to invite people to know who our Lord really is, right? And the truth about this life and its purpose, and that there was a prophet named Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like, aren't we supposed to do da'wah? Aren't we supposed to tell them the truth? And the answer to that is yes. I mean, ultimately, we should all want to invite people to Islam. The challenge, of course, is, again, hindsight's 2020, is how do you do that in the wisest and best way? And one of the things I know that happens, especially with a lot of new converts, I think it's, you know, as a way to try to deal with, you know, there's some, I'm trying to remember who the sheikh is that gave the beautiful analogy to me once. Sheikh from LA, you'll remember him. Hopefully his name will come to me. He said once at this convert event that when people become Muslim, it's like you get in a rocket ship, and just like a rocket has to have all this force to leave Earth and go into space, converts often do the same thing, because it takes so much to break away from your past life. To make these changes, you need to really push. And so there's a lot of discomfort. Now you're navigating a new life in your family, and you're not supposed to participate, but emotionally you want to. And I think that there's a lot of discomfort there. And one of the ways people do it is they're like, do you know the history of the Christmas tree? You just tell their mom, why do you have a Christmas tree? Don't you know that the Christmas tree is not really biblical? Do you know in pagan times, right? And we go to history. And Constantine, and we go through 325, and when actually the people talk about when Jesus was, there was the grand debate over who he really was, and all these things were happening in the Roman Empire. The thing is, all of these things, there's so much history that anyone can go Google right now and look up the history of Jesus and deciding who he really was, right? The history of the Christmas tree, what its source really is. There's so much that's available, but what happens is, I think emotionally for people is, I can't handle not being with you, mom and dad, or brother and sister, aunt and uncle, grandma, in this space. So now let me just try to quickly change your mind. I think all you're missing is a little bit of historical fact. And if I give this to you, we can now change together. And people don't work like that. People don't, it's not that history has never helped people come to truth. I think it does. I think that happens on a, we're seeing that across the country on a civil level, right? Looking into actual history of America, and changes are being made as a result of people actually hearing real history. But on a religious level, I think for many people, when you recognize, again, this nostalgia, family tradition, identity, right? Your identity is all wrapped up in so many traditions. These are the things that define you. And now someone wants to come at you with a history point. It usually just creates, if anything, either argumentation or a lot of hurt and offense. And so a lot of converts, yes, they have tried to go into the holiday season and try to debate with their families based on history. And I personally feel like that's not the right time. It's not the right time. It's not the right place. Emotionally for people, they're not in a place, for many people, where they're open. And so I think what happens is fighting around the dinner table, upset and angry people. It's kind of like people say, like, when, I'm sure you're familiar with jokes about the Thanksgiving dinner in America, like politics and religion. My mother had a rule that at her dinner table, religion and politics were off the table, and because she knew it was divisive for people. And so, so I think I've experienced converts really trying to go at change by kind of trying to pound in with history, and it really just resulting in hurt.
Got it. I'm going to mention the other two very quickly. And by the way, if you do have a question to Megan, please use the chat box on YouTube, and inshallah we can entertain that. Something that I think you refer to yourself as having done. Return home, that's part of the mistakes. Return home to visit with family, but remain emotionless during all the festivities in an attempt to prove they are not in any way celebrating.
Yeah. You can tell this ebook's quite personal. Yes. And I think having seen other people go through the same thing, religiously, when you're in this place where you're sincerely wanting Allah to be pleased with you, you are sincerely wanting to do the right thing, but you genuinely do not have a teacher or a mentor to really step in and guide you and advise you on how to handle this. One of the ways to do it is, well, if I go to the family Christmas dinner or the family Easter brunch, or whatever religious holiday there is, if I go to these things, and by the way, not even just religious, because for many Muslims, anything outside of Eid, they consider these are not permissible, right? So there's other holidays where we might not call them religious holidays, but that same tension is present. So some people have said, well, if I go and I have to be there, but I'm there, but I'm not there, then I'm not really participating, therefore I'm not sinning. And the thing is, again, there's a very sincere desire to not make a mistake. And I think that and that's a good thing, right? If we could all go through life worried so much about if we're doing the right thing to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I think we'd all be better people. That's taqwa at the end of the day. And it is taqwa, and it is a deep desire to please Allah. But again, we're struggling with figuring out, what does that balance look like? And so somebody will end up having to be home for Christmas, or they're there, or they're visiting their elderly family and things like that. But then they're not allowing themselves to experience joy or connection. And so they're neither here nor there. And of course, if you're with your, I have people that were telling me about, for example, like their grandmother who practically raised them, that they're so close to, that they love. And now they're going to be with their grandmother. But then their grandmother has knit them a sweater, and they're going to be like, oh, thank you, grandmother. Okay, and put it away. Like, your grandmother knit you a sweater. Like, it's being able to keep that human connection. And I think a lot of people lose that, at least again, for many converts, I think in that beginning period, because they just don't know what to do. They don't know how to be in that environment and not do something wrong.
Got it. So Megan, let me ask you this now. If today's the 24th,
yeah,
it's Christmas Eve. If a convert were to come and ask you, what do I do?
Mm-hmm.
What advice would you give them?
Are they living far or close to their family?
Well, let's put it this way. They have the opportunity to be around their family.
Yeah. I feel like before I say anything, Sheikh Yassir, you should be answering that question, because my opinion is not legalistic. And I feel like if you want that advice to be sound, it has to be balanced first with the understanding of like Sharia around this area, because it isn't so simple.
Yeah, so remember, we're not discussing the theology or the jurisprudence, or just at a human level. Like you said, there is a human being behind whatever it is that we do or say. And by no means, like I said, neither you nor I nor anybody else out there, the point is not to compromise the deen. I think the question that we have is, and I think you're alluding to this so beautifully, and that is, can we minimize the potential damage that has taken place, that can take place by just following simple steps?
Sure. The reason why I hesitate initially, and then I'll answer, is because so some of us have a joke amongst the converts. So like myself, I've been Muslim since 1997, right? So it's been a while. Some of us have jokes that it became Muslim in the late 90s, early 2000s, that, back then, like the advice for everything was so strict that like we did everything like by the letter, and then we grew from there. But then today, because it seems like it's many people I've noticed are making decisions based on how they feel versus maybe a foundation in terms of maybe parts of Islam. I don't know if I'm making sense. It's definitely something a lot of converts that have been Muslim will talk about. In other words, what I'm getting at is, I think it's important for all of us to recognize that how we feel about something may or may not be right. And I guess I just want to put that first, because again, if I went with my feelings years ago, then I would have probably done just about everything, because I felt, a lot of people say, I don't feel like this is wrong. I don't feel like this, Allah is not going to be okay with that. That's why I said, like, first, I would probably ask you to answer initially, because I do firmly believe that as Muslims, knowledge is so important for us, because it guides us, especially in times when we are very emotional. If I didn't have anyone else to point to, my biggest thing at this stage in my life has been, if it's something is religious in nature in your family, like, they are doing a religious ceremony, they are praising Jesus, they are praying to him, there's that, they're praying, they're reciting things from the Bible. This is a place where perhaps you're an observer and not a participant. And giving, and again, we're talking about because you are with your family, to be a respectful observer, but not participate. And this is with the assumption that your family knows that you're Muslim. It's a really different question when your family doesn't know you're Muslim yet. And there's a lot of converts who are in that boat too. And they're like, what do I do? What do I do? My family doesn't know. My grandmother's going to grab my hand and say the prayer with us, you know? So there are different situations. But I think being a respectful observer, I pray is okay, you know, because we live in a society where we respectfully observe all kinds of things. And we do not agree with them. We're not condoning them, but we offer people their right to determine how they will live their lives. And especially now we're talking about in the home of your parents or your grandmother, your grandfather, your aunt, your uncle, you know, you're in someone else's private home. And in someone else's home, we do not have the right to impose our restrictions or our beliefs, in my opinion, on other people. So you're now, you know, no matter how old you are, you're going back, it's still home. You were born there, that's fine. Your bedroom's still down the hall, but it's your parents' home. So be a respectful observer. But for other things, I guess for me, it's really individual. Is your family going to be deeply offended, hurt, angry? Is it going to become a bigger obstacle for them if you say, I'm out, I don't participate whatsoever? And again, even that, Sheikh Yassir, is an individual. The thing is, I feel like there's no blanket advice. Can a person, are they in a place in their iman where if they told their family, you know what, I'm Muslim now, and I will love to see you guys on the 26th, let's have lunch together, maybe pre-COVID life, right? But I don't celebrate Christmas anymore. And their family doesn't like it, and they're okay with their family being upset with them. That's a sacrifice that they can handle. Then maybe for them, this is the choice. But maybe for someone else, the idea of their father cutting them off or their mother, you know, crying at their feet and wailing and being so upset. How can you, why can't you just be with us? I just want you to sit at the table. I've raised you. Depending on the personality, right? How are you going to hurt your family? I think each person has to decide, like, is this necessary for me to hurt them? Is there a way for me to minimize the hurt or the offense? And I guess, I'm sorry I don't have a straight answer. And I think it's because every single situation, people can be very different because everyone can handle different things. Every family dynamic is different. And I think ultimately at the end of the day, my most important advice is do your best, like be respectful. Don't shame them. Don't try to lecture them now. Don't try to make them feel like evil, terrible, awful people. Be respectful and be sincere in your heart. You don't have to agree with your parents or your brother or your sister religiously to still love them and to still be in their life and to be happy for them and to be happy for their joy and to be happy for what's important to them. I guess, I don't know, it's not perfect advice, but that's kind of where it went.
I think, I think what you're saying is that different people experience these challenges differently, and it would be wrong to just give one advice that fits all. And like, you just started by asking, do you live close by? Is this a sacrifice that people are willing to make? And I thought it was well delivered. What about this idea of, did the spirit of Eid at a communal level, did that replace that Christmas spirit that you've experienced, prior to you becoming a Muslim? And is this something that converts, look forward to? Like, what, I can't wait for Eid now that we don't have Christmas. Eid is around the corner.
Ooh, okay. Well, I think it depends. When I was an early Muslim, I was in college, and there wasn't really a Muslim community nearby. So like my first Eid was alone. My second, by the way, I didn't even know there was Eid prayer till like the third year I was Muslim. So I didn't really even know that there was something as Eid prayer. It wasn't until my being Muslim 3.5 years, I knew that there was like Tarawih prayers at the masjid. Like these were things no one had ever told me. I didn't know, because many times those years they happened during like breaks and vacations. So I was kind of alone on campus. So initially, no, but again, as a college student back then, I was in Ohio in the Midwest, no, there's nothing to Eid. Later on, once I was part of a community, a little bit better, but I would say, I think it's an unfair question, to be honest, to compare the Christmas season in America to Eid traditions for Muslims on a global level, because everybody has these traditions, and it's interesting because I think a lot of the converts that I know feel like they've helped their communities and their own families have a more joyous Eid by doing something, right? They're like, you go, you get all dressed up, it's early in the morning, you go and you pray, and then you go home. They're like, what was that? Like, why do we get all dressed up in new clothes and then go home? Like they really struggled with that. Like, where's the celebration? I think that's because we're coming out of this society where like everything is a celebration. There's cards for everything, wrapping paper, everything, decor for everything. Like it's huge. And you can see now things are changing. Like generationally, things are changing. Now we have Eid crafts and Eid al-Adha crafts and Ramadan crafts, and we've got wrapping paper and we've got decor coming, and there's cookie stuff. Like people are starting to create their own version of, like they call it the Muslim Christmas, right? The Muslim Eid. But I would say initially, no, it was very difficult. Once I had my own family and I had my own kids, that part got easier because I had someone else to do something for. I think those who are alone, again, it's Eid prayer. You're up at Fajr, you shower, you get dressed, you go pray, and then everybody talks through the entire khutbah. If you want to talk about one thing as a convert that to this day, by the way, like I finally, like I lost it. Like I couldn't take a couple of years back for the first time in my whole years of Muslim. I finally turned around and said, could you be quiet? That was one of the most shocking things for me. Like going to Eid prayer and then the khutbah, and it's that time of year where like, when you, Sheikh Yassir, or someone else is going to speak, and we're there to hear like the words of Allah and the Prophet ﷺ said, and people talk through the entire thing. I have to say, like, I could never understand that. Like if I went to church before, no one's saying a peep. But I could never, and to this day, could understand, like, I understand that it's optional that you hear the khutbah, but it's not optional that you be quiet when someone's talking. Like, go outside. So I would say, like, from that perspective, and I don't know now if this is cultural more than anything, the frustration around what Eid was like for me has remained very difficult. What I considered chaos and disrespect, the verses of the Quran are being spoken, everyone's too busy to listen. Like that kind of environment for me has been spiritually challenging, right? Having to ask the women multiple times to please stop talking because someone's speaking, that's been very challenging. So I think like this is different again, but I do know that for a lot of converts, they felt like Eid was not exciting. However, I also think through the years, when you come to appreciate what you're celebrating on Eid, then it changed. For me specifically, and I think others, right? That we're not, I appreciate the season and the lights and the Christmas music and all those things, it's great. But there's something special about Eid that eventually you come to understand, like it's not a celebration in the same way. You're celebrating something very special in each one of them. And so that really changed how I felt about Eid itself. But I know for many families that have kids in school and they're competing with Christmas and they're competing with Halloween and they're competing with the Easter season and there's so many things going on, I think that's where we're seeing like the need for change and to do more so that people feel like I think for many people here, they want to feel like Eid is as important as these other holidays. So. Nice.
All righty. Yeah. So when you say the need for more to be done, that's something that we struggle with in our Islamic centers. And I remember talking to Brother Malik Shah last week. I brought up the idea of in our masjid, I'm not sure if you were there back then or not, but in one of the Eids, we said that, if you are alone this Eid, we would love to host you and we would love to have you. And we had a barbecue at the park across the street from the masjid. And somehow it grew from a barbecue to, bringing clowns, bringing animal show. And it just went crazy. And to many people, they would say that, yeah, it was the Eid prayers. Yeah, it was the donuts. But they remember it was that outing as a community that really gave them the spirit of Eid at that point. And really my hope that then when we bring up these topics, it's not just to, diminish the nostalgia that Megan likes to talk about, but what we want to do is that we really want to say, look, okay, so the outcome of this, seeing how painful this time can be for people. Now, we have never experienced Christmas as a time to celebrate. To most of us, especially the immigrants amongst us, Christmas was a time either to go and do the the different conferences, or it was a family reunion, or it was time to just, join back with your family, not knowing that somebody can actually be missing out. They are alone, and we have not created alternatives for them. And the Eid time was also not an alternative for these people as well.
Can I add something to that real quick as a final thought on that?
Please.
You just mentioned, I think, the most important thing. I feel like sometimes, this is just an opinion, but I feel like sometimes as Muslims, we feel like time has to be Islamified for it to be valuable. So we have to have the conference, we have to have a speaker, we have to have an event that's specifically around seeking knowledge, something serious, for our time to have been spent well. But when you look at the holidays, and even what you just said, okay, being an immigrant family coming to America, you don't celebrate Christmas, but hey, you get days off work and everyone can get together, right? At the end of the day, what people want the most is connection. And so even by just putting out like places for people to have reasons to linger, like I know at our masjid here, where you used to be with us as our imam, just having the, like you said, for my son, Bilal, right? It's the donut. The Krispy Kreme donut is Eid. Like, it's not Eid without the Krispy Kreme donut. And I think the last time we didn't get any, so we had to go pick up some, right? So actually, no, last Eid, right? Because there was no Eid prayer because of COVID, right? So we specifically had to go get the Krispy Kreme donut. That is forever in their childhood, like, memories. The Krispy Kreme donut is Eid prayer, right? 8 a.m. Krispy Kreme and all that sugar. But the fact that there was just like, it's simple, right? Tea, coffee, donuts, and some like sweets. But it gives people a reason to stay and to linger and to not have to leave. The one little bouncy house in the back parking lot, the two little bouncy houses, right? It gives people a way to linger. And so now, whether you have a family or you don't have a family, everyone's lingering. And when you give people a reason to hang out, people connect. And I think connection is just so valuable. I think it's the one thing that, right now with the pandemic, right? So many people are struggling because of that lack of in-person connection and getting together. So even more than having to do fancy things, it's just, like you said, the barbecue, just give people a way to hang out. And when you make it possible for them to hang out, they will connect. And I remember one of the other local masjids here at the Irvine Masjid, they decided to put benches outside. Just the simple idea of giving people a way to hang out, like just somewhere to come sit. And when you do those things, people will connect. And so for the converts amongst the community who maybe don't have families yet, or even the ones that do, they have kids and things like that, and they don't have extended family nearby. For a lot of people, they go and visit all their family, right? Eid is a time of visiting all your family. In Muslim countries, my friends would say, oh, Megan, the whole neighborhood, everyone's celebrating, and you go house to house and all the aunties give you sweets, and you don't have that here, right? But we can recreate. And if you notice, all of those things are about people seeing people. It's all about people seeing people. So I feel like just giving us ways to hang out and connect without it feeling like awkward, or you're like the lone person trying to hang out with the married people, or even if you have a family. So connection, I just think all the ways that we can get people together just to connect, I think will be beneficial, inshallah.
Beautiful. Very, very well stated. I think the takeaway from this is be creative.
Yeah.
Make ways for people to connect. The time of Eid should not be a time where people feel lonely. The time of the holidays, for us, it may be a time for family reunion. But to many people, they are missing out on having a reunion with their own families. And I think that our Islamic centers and our communities, we ought to be making good, viable alternatives. Megan, this has been a beautiful conversation.
Thank you.
And I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing what you've just shared with us. It was beautifully stated and absolutely appreciated. So, on behalf of all of our viewers out there, MIC, Salam, and PVS, we want to extend a sincere Jazakallah khair, Ya Rabbal Alameen. May Allah keep you safe, keep your family safe, Ya Rabbal Alameen. And to all of our viewers, if anyone out there or any of our loved ones is not feeling well, may Allah grant them a speedy recovery. If any of us or our loved ones are going through difficult times, may Allah ease our pain. If any of our loved ones have passed away, may Allah bless their souls. Thank you for being with us. We will see you again next week, inshallah. And once again, on behalf of all of our viewers, Megan, thank you very much for joining us. I did put the link to that ebook if you are interested, inshallah, and get it. It's a nice, joyful read. Jazakumullah khair. Until we see you next week, inshallah, we say so long and assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.